A billionaire CEO stands in the middle of his own store, wearing a janitor's uniform, holding a phone that is about to destroy 2 careers. 15 employees watch him press play. The voice that comes out of the speaker belongs to their manager, Craig Dawson, and he is laughing about a woman standing 10 feet away. She's got the kid with the heart thing. She knows if she loses this job, she loses everything. She's contained. The word lands on Rosa Mendez like a verdict she never got to appeal. Craig's face drains. His clipboard, the weapon he rules floor with, hangs useless in his hand. Because the janitor he hired 4 days ago, the desperate man he tried to buy for $300 a week, is reaching into his jacket pocket. And what comes out isn't a wallet. "It's a badge. My name is James Whitfield," the man says. And you. James Whitfield had not mopped a floor in 39 years. He thought about that in the back of the rental sedan. Not his usual car, not his usual driver. Detroit sliding past the window like a city that had survived things it wasn't supposed to survive. Gray sky. January light that hadn't fully committed to being light yet. A highway that needed repaving and wasn't getting it anytime soon. 39 years. He was 16 the last time he held a mop. Standing in the corridor of Mercy General Hospital at 2 a.m, waiting. His mother always came out the east exit. Always. Because the west exit had a broken light and she didn't like walking past it alone. Her name was Dorothea. She worked the overnight custodial shift, 5 nights a week, for 22 years. And when she came out that east exit, she smelled like the job. Pine cleaner and industrial disinfectant, and underneath both of those, something harder to name. He'd found the word for it eventually, decades later. Sitting in a boardroom with people who talked about human capital and labor efficiency. Effort. She smelled like effort. She worked every day of her life until the day she couldn't. No sick leave that covered what was actually wrong with her. No health insurance that reached far enough. No one in any position of authority who thought to check whether the people doing the hardest work had what they needed to survive doing it. James built an entire company so that would never happen to anyone who worked for him. He was starting to wonder if he'd actually done that. The sedan pulled into the hotel parking lot. Budget property. 3 stars on a generous day. He'd booked it himself under a different name, paid cash at the front desk. Nobody at Thompson Retail knew where he was. Nobody at corporate knew what he was doing. Nobody except Nadine, and she knew only as much as she needed to. He got out, carried his own bag, took the stairs instead of the elevator because the elevator had a mirror and he wasn't ready to look at himself yet. Room 214. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened his laptop. The quarterly report for Store 44 was still on the screen from the flight. He'd been reading it for 3 days, reading it and rereading it, and looking for the thing that was wrong with it, because something was wrong with it. And the wrongness was not in anything the report said. It was in everything the report didn't say. 0 complaints filed with HR, 0 calls to the employee assistance line, 0 turnover grievances in 8 months. Employee satisfaction surveys returned at a 94% completion rate. Average score of 4, 8 out of 5. James had been running retail operations for 30 years. He knew what a real 4, 8 looked like. Looked like one person who gave a 3 because the break room microwave was slow. It looked like 2 people who left the comment section blank because they ran out of time. It looked like human beings being human, which meant imperfect, which meant real. A perfect score was not a good score. A perfect score was the score of people who had learned that honesty was a risk they couldn't afford. He called Nadine at 11 that night. She picked up on the second ring. "I need everything on Store 44, he said. Manager personnel file, scheduling records, payroll for the last 12 months. Don't route it through regional. Send it directly to me, unencrypted." A pause, short but specific. "How soon?" she asked. "I needed it yesterday," he said. She didn't ask why. That was one of the things Hush trusted about Nadine Okafor. She heard the thing beneath the thing, and she moved toward it without needing it explained. The file arrived at 11:47. James sat at the small desk in room 214 and reads 412 pages of very clean documentation. Too clean. Every scheduling change logged with a reason. Every form filed correctly. Every signature in the right place. Every explanation just plausible enough that no one looking from a distance would question it, and his own signature on the regional approval forms. 8 months of them. He had not signed a single one. He closed the laptop, sat in the dark for a while, thought about a 16-year-old boy on a hospital corridor floor. reading a paperback under a flickering light, waiting for footsteps. Then he opened the laptop again and started building his cover. Joe Williams, construction worker. Laid off 8 months ago when a commercial project fell through, looking for anything. No family nearby, not picky, grateful for the opportunity. The grateful part was the most important part. He knew exactly who Craig Dawson was from the personnel file, the headshot, the performance reviews written in the careful, self-congratulatory language of a man performing competence for an invisible audience. Men like that needed gratitude the way certain plants needed shade. It kept them comfortable, kept them from looking too closely. James packed one bag, worn jeans, work boots that had seen actual work years ago, a second-hand jacket purchased that afternoon from a thrift store 2 miles from the hotel, no watch, a burner phone, his real phone locked in the room safe. He looked in the bathroom mirror, 55 years old, gray at the temples, hands that had gotten softer than he remembered. He pressed them flat on the counter. "You built this company," he said to the man in the mirror. Then he put on the baseball cap and stopped being himself for a while. 7:45. The parking lot of Store 44 was already half full. James sat in the rental car with the in-off and watched his employees walk in. A young woman in uniform shoes that had been resoled at least once. An older man moving with the careful economy of someone whose knees were sending him messages he'd stopped enjoying. A teenager in a vest 2 sizes too large, earbuds in, the specific stride of someone who could not afford to be late. Nobody was laughing. Nobody stopped to talk to anyone else. They moved like people who had learned that being noticed was not something to invite. James had walked that walk a long time ago, in buildings that belonged to other people. He got out of the car. The store smelled like every retail store he'd been in. Floor cleaner and cardboard and climate-controlled air that made every month feel like March. Fluorescent lights humming at their single indifferent frequency. The soft percussion of a register. A PA announcement about something in aisle 7. Nobody looked up. He found the customer service desk and asked for the manager. Craig Dawson came out of the back office 4 minutes later, 36 years old per his file. Hair gelled into precise submission. Manager badge positioned on his chest like a decoration earned in a war. The walk of a man who had rehearsed his authority so many times he'd forgotten it was a performance. He looked James up and down in exactly the way James expected. "You're here about the custodial position?" Not a question. A filing. "Yes, sir," James said. And he said it the way Joe Williams would say it, which was with the weight of 8 months of unemployment rent check due Friday. The interview lasted 11 minutes. Craig asked 3 questions. James answered them the way a desperate man answers things, carefully, without flourish. Making sure it's in project that rent and the willingness to work any shift, any hours, whatever was needed. Craig's eyes ran a calculation. "Night shift," Craig said, 10 to 6, $12 an hour. James nodded. "We may have full-time openings eventually," Craig added. "Right now it's as needed. Hours vary." A pause with a weight to it. "You understand that." James understood something different than what Craig meant, but he nodded. "You'll be working with our current custodial staff. There's a woman, Rosa. She'll show you the routine." Something shifted behind Craig's eyes. Small, practiced. "Don't let her fill your head with complaints. She has a tendency toward drama." James said nothing. Craig took that as agreement. Fine. Craig could take what he wanted. 6 hours before his first shift. James spent most of them in the parts of the store that managers don't visit unless something goes wrong. The break room, the loading dock corridor, the employee restroom hallway with its bulletin board and its human residue, a birthday card taped to the cinder block, a lost scarf notice, a holiday potluck sign-up sheet from November with most lines blank. He stopped at the schedule board. It was not disorganized. That was the first thing he understood about it. Disorganized would have been accidental. This was deliberate. Shifts crossed out and rewritten in different ink. Hours penciled in, erased, penciled again. Names scattered across weeks in patterns that made no sense if your goal was running a 45,000 square foot store efficiently, but made perfect sense if your goal was something else. He found Rosa Mendez's name. This week, 12 hours. Last week, 35. The week before, 18. The week before that, back to 12. He did the math. The math was ugly. Hours that fluctuated like that meant no consistent benefits eligibility, no ability to budget, no way to tell a doctor's billing office whether you'd have the same insurance next month as you had this one. No way to plan anything, except to keep showing up and hope the number went up. James stood at that board for a long time. Then he heard it. It came from the women's employee restroom. Not dramatic crying, not the kind that announces itself. The controlled kind, practiced. The sound of someone who had learned that falling apart in the middle of a shift was not something they could afford. But sometimes it happened anyway, in the one place where no one could see. James had heard that sound before. Through a different door, in a different building, a long time ago. He stood in the hallway and waited. Button knock. 4 move. Maybe 5. The door opened. Ceased smaller than he expected. A Latina in her early 40s. A custodial uniform washed so many times the green had gone gray at the collar. Her name badge, Rosa Mendez, custodial staff, tilted on its pin as she stepped through the door, and she caught it before it fell with a reflex that suggested she'd done it before. Her hands were shaking when she reattached it. I saw them. Her hands cracked at the knuckles, reddened from the wrist, the damage that comes from industrial cleaning chemicals, used without adequate gloves, used too much, used too long. She didn't look up. I'm sorry, she said to the floor. I just needed a minute. I'm going back. Take your time, James said. She looked up then. The quick, precise assessment of someone who had learned to read strangers fast, because strangers could be dangerous. I don't know you, she said. I'm Joe, starting tonight. Custodial. Something in her shoulders shifted. Not relaxed, recalibrated. They hired someone new, she said quietly, as if she was saying something else entirely. Is that bad? She looked past him toward the main floor, checking something. It means he's planning to cut someone's hours again, she said. He always hires before he cuts, so he has a body to point to when someone asks why. James filed that away. How long have you worked here? I asked. 3 years. Then, almost to herself, 36 months. I counted. You like it? A sound came out of her that might have been a laugh in a different life. I need it, she said, which was not the same thing. She straightened her badge, squared her shoulders. He watches the clock, she said. Breaks are 12 minutes, even though the handbook says 15. Don't let him catch you at 13. She walked past him toward the main floor, and James noticed, before she turned the corner, the slight favor she gave her left leg, not a limp, the careful gait of someone managing something they hadn't told anyone about. He took out the burner phone and sent a text to Nadine. Pull Rosa Mendez benefits enrollment history. Everything from hire date. I found out about Camila at 3 in the afternoon. The break room was the kind of space designed by someone who had never needed to use one. 2 folding tables. Plastic chairs that creaked when you shifted. A coffee machine that made coffee the way a vending machine makes food. Technically, but without conviction. Rosa came in for her 15-minute break and sat at the far end of the table. Pulled out a phone with a cracked screen held together with a strip of clear tape. Started typing something. Stopped. Put it face down on the table and pressed both palms flat against the surface, like she was holding something down. James poured 2 cups of the terrible coffee, brought one over. She looked at the cup, then at him. You don't have to do that, she said. I made too much. She took it, was quiet for a moment. My daughter has a cardiology appointment next week, she said. Not to him exactly. Out loud. The way you say something when you need it to exist somewhere outside your own head. Her surgeon moved the surgery up. Heart condition. She was born with it. She stopped. The short version is she needs the surgery soon. James kept his voice even. How old is she? 8. A beat. Her name is Camila. A pause. She's funny. She explains things to her stuffed animals like they're students. Full lectures. She has an elephant named Gerald who apparently needs a lot of remedial math. Something moved in James's chest. Small. Real. She sounds like a lot, he said. She's everything, Rosa said. The way people say things when they've stopped trying to make them sound like less. Then her face changed, closed slightly. The insurance, she said. I've been here 3 years. I'm supposed to have full coverage by now. But my classification, Mr. Dawson changed it. Part-time temporary. Even though I work more hours than half the full-time staff. She looked at the table. Which means the coverage I'm supposed to have doesn't apply. Which means Camila's surgery. She shook her head. Have you talked to HR? James asked. She looked at him as if he'd switched languages. HR reports to Mr. Dawson, she said bluntly. Everything here does. James looked at his cup, kept his face still. That doesn't sound right, he said. No, she said. It doesn't. Somewhere on the main floor, a door opened. Rosa heard it before he did. She was already standing, already moving. The coffee barely touched. Breaks are 12 minutes, she said again. Quietly. Automatically. The reminder of a rule she'd internalized until it lived in her bones. She was gone before he could answer. Craig Dawson arrived on the floor at 3:17. James tracked the time because he had started tracking everything. Craig moved through the store the way certain men move through spaces they've decided belong to them. Slow, eyes scanning for imperfection. He stopped at a displayed near electronics that was stared at it, didn't fix it, wrote something on his clipboard and moved on. Then he found Rosa. She was mopping near the far end of housewares. The floor was clean. James could see the overhead lights reflected in it from 20 feet away, clean in the way that takes real work. The kind of floor you could use as a mirror. Mendez. Craig's voice cut across the section. Rosa's shoulders tensed, visible even at distance. But Mendez, louder. She stopped, turned. Mr. Dawson, this floor, he gestured with the clipboard. What exactly have you been doing for the past hour? She looked at the floor, then at him. Mopping it. It doesn't look like it. James looked at the floor. The floor looked like a floor that had been mopped with skill and attention, and probably a little more care than the job required. Rosa said nothing. This was not compliance. It was a practice decision. The choice of someone who had learned that arguing cost more than absorbing. Do it again, Craig said. And this time, put some effort in. He wrote something on the clipboard. The clipboard was always there, always producing notations. James had begun to understand that the clipboard was not a tool. It was a weapon that looked like a tool. I need you in my office at 4, Craig said. Scheduling issue. He walked away, whistling. Rosa dipped the mop into the bucket and started again. Clean floor. Being cleaned again. Because the alternative was worse than the redundancy. James watched her work for a moment. Then he crossed the floor to where Craig's office sat behind its 2 glass walls and knocked on the open door. Mr. Dawson. He stood with the posture of someone who needed something. I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity. I won't let you down. Craig looked up from his desk, ran the same calculation as the morning, reached the same result. Good attitude, Craig said. I'll remember that. James nodded and withdrew, walked slowly back toward the supply area. In his 11 minutes in that office doorway, he had seen 3 things. The schedule on Craig's monitor, the payroll spreadsheet open in a second window, and in the corner of Craig's desk, a small black router that was not standard store equipment and was not connected to the store's visible network. A private router, which meant a private connection, which meant Craig was conducting some of his business on a network that bypassed corporate monitoring. James texted Nadine, private router in manager's office, not on store network. Can you trace device registrations from the outside? Her reply came in 4 minutes. Working on it. Give me until morning. Hobby put the phone away and went to learn the supply closet situation before his shift started. What he found there was its own kind of evidence. 1 partial bottle of floor cleaner for a 45,000 square foot store. Hose replacement mop heads where there should have been 10. A shelf of paper goods so depleted it barely justified having a shelf. The kind of resource depletion that doesn't happen by accident. That happens when someone with authority over supply budgets decides that the people doing the cleaning can make do with less, and the money earmarked for those supplies needs to go somewhere else. James knew the corporate allocation for a store this size. He had approved that allocation himself. He had sat in a room and argued for adequate cleaning supplies as a basic operating standard, not a luxury. What he was looking at was approximately 1/10 of what should have been there. He stood in the supply closet for a moment with his hands at his sides. Then he went to clock in for his first night shift. 10 o'clock. The last customers left. The front doors locked. The store became a different place. Not quieter, exactly. The fluorescent lights stayed as relentless as ever, but the sound changed. The ambient noise of shoppers drained away and left something starker in its place. The beep of registers going dark, the rattle of a cart being returned, the particular silence of a large space occupied only by the people who worked in it. Rosa was already there when James arrived, cart loaded in the order she'd worked through it. Supplies arranged with the efficiencies of someone who'd done this hundreds of times, without needing to think about the sequence. She looked at his ID badge. Joe Williams, custodial staff. She said, we work out from the center. Don't mix bathroom supplies with floor supplies. He checks the cart. A pause, I mean it. He inventories what we use. Got it, James said. And if he asks how long something took, say less than it did. He docks time for taking too long. He calls it efficiency monitoring. James took that in. They started with the East Wing, and within the first 20 minutes, the work was teaching him things the quarterly report couldn't. The anti-fatigue meds that the company handbook required arts young standing workstations were absorbed in the stockroom and the loading area. The lighting in the corridor, behind electronics, was half-functional. One of the mop heads Rosa was using had been reversed and re-reversed so many times the fibers had compacted into something closer to a scrub brush. He worked. The physical grammar of it came back slowly. Angle of the mop, the pressure on the lower back, the way you loaded your shoulders differently depending on what you were carrying. His body remembered the shape of it even though the years had taken away the conditioning. His mother had done this for 22 years. Full shifts, extra shifts, weekends when the money needed it. He thought about that once briefly, and then he put it away. He needed to stay present. At midnight, Craig made his first round. Prowled was the better word. Through the empty aisles, footsteps echoing. He found Rosa restocking paper goods in the customer restroom corridor and stood there watching her for a full minute without speaking. Then, Santos, you're behind. She didn't correct the name. James noticed that. She absorbed the wrong name without reacting, the way you absorb something that has happened enough times to stop registering as an insult. I'll catch up, she said. 30 minutes docked. Inefficiency. Craig made a note, walked away. 30 minutes, $6. 6 removed in real time while James stood 10 feet away, holding a mop. He tracked the time Craig had spent watching Rosa, then docking her. It was 4 minutes and 20 seconds. He wrote the numbers in the small notepad he kept in his jacket pocket. At 12:47, Craig completed his round and disappeared into his office. James had clocked the intervals over the past 2 hours. Craig emerged every 90 to 100 minutes. He was consistent about it, which meant there was a window. James told Rosa he was going to check the supply closet near the office corridor. She was in the middle of the housewares glass cases and didn't look up. He moved to the office corridor, positioned his cart along the wall, angled his body so the phone was blocked from any line of sight toward the door. Craig's office door was almost closed, a 2-inch gap, light falling through it in a narrow stripe. James opened his camera app, set it to video, held the phone low, angled toward the gap. Through the opening, he could see Craig's monitor clearly. A spreadsheet, employee names down the left column, hours across the top. Craig was editing. Rosa Mendez, 31 hours entered. Craig highlighted the cell, typed 12. Marcus Webb, 28 hours, changed to 16. Diana Kowalski, 24 hours, changed to 14. Then Craig scrolled right to a column James hadn't seen in any official record. The header read C. Dawson Jr. The hours disappeared from the employee cells and appeared in that column. Not errors, not rounding. The hours belonging to Rosa and Marcus and Brianna were being redistributed to an account that had no corresponding person on the sales floor. James held the phone steady, kept his breathing control. The recording ran for 4 minutes and 17 seconds before Craig minimized the spreadsheet and opened something else. James moved the cart, slowly, back down the corridor and around the corner. He stopped in the supply area, sent the video file to Nadine's encrypted email. His text said 3 words, "Watch the spreadsheet." He put the phone away, leaned both hands on the supply shelf. What he was looking at was not a rogue manager padding his own expenses. What he was looking at was a system, built deliberately, running cleanly. The kind of operation that requires either significant technical sophistication or significant help from someone with access. Someone with more access than Craig Dawson had been given. He sent a second text, this one to a number he hadn't used in a while, his attorney. I need to understand the current federal thresholds for wage theft prosecution. Call me tomorrow, 6 a.m. Then he went back to work. At 2 in the morning, Craig appeared in the stockroom doorway. James was moving pallets, alone, which he had been doing for 90 minutes. 15 pallets of merchandise, a 2-person minimum job under any reasonable safety standard, assigned to 1 person because Craig had decided the night custodial staff could handle it. Craig leaned against the doorframe. Williams, he said. James set down a box, turned. Craig looked at him with an expression that was half appraisal and half something less comfortable, like a man who had seen something interesting and wasn't sure what to do with it yet. You're not from around here, Craig said. Flint originally, James said. Moved around. You worked other jobs? Before construction? James kept his posture open, unhurried. A man who had nothing to hide, which was also the posture of a man who had learned to look like he had nothing to hide. Few things, he said. Security work for a while, nothing fancy. Craig tilted his head. Small stuff, James said. Background work, surveillance, that kind of thing. Craig was quiet for a moment. The calculation behind his eyes was visible if you knew what to look for. I might have a use for someone like that, he said finally. Side work. $300 a week cash. You'd be watching certain employees, reporting back to me, whether they're talking to each other about things they shouldn't be talking about. James looked at him steadily. What kind of things? He asked. Scheduling, Craig said. Benefits, whether anyone's been talking to outside parties. A small shrug. Drama. $300 a week, James said. Starting now. James let a beat of silence pass, long enough to look like a man considering an offer. Not so long as to look like a man deciding whether to accept a bribe. I keep my head down, he said. That's what I do. Craig stepped forward and clapped him once on the shoulder. Proprietary, satisfied. You're going to fit in fine here, Joe, he said. He walked out, whistling again. The tuneless, comfortable whistle of a man who thought he'd just bought something useful. James stood in the stockroom alone. He thought about his mother and the east exit and the broken light on the west side. He thought about the notebook in his jacket pocket, already 3 pages full. Then he picked up the next pallet. At 4 a.m, he found the envelope under his windshield wiper. No car around his in the parking lot, the loading dock quiet. A single security light buzzing at the far corner. He opened it under the parking lot light. 4 words, handwritten, blue ink. They know you're watching. He read it twice, turned it over. Nothing on the back, not a threat. The shape of it was wrong for a threat. A threat announces itself. This was something else. A warning from someone who was, for reasons he didn't yet understand, on his side. Someone inside that building. Someone who had seen enough to know something was wrong and had seen James watching and had made a calculation. He folded the note and put it in his jacket pocket. Got in the car. Tuesday. Less than 24 hours in. I had a fake job, a recorded crime, a manager who thought he'd hired a spy, and a column of stolen hours flowing to an account that shouldn't exist, and someone inside the building who wanted him to keep going. He started the car. He called Nadine at 5:53 a.m. She picked up immediately. The spreadsheet, he said. I watched it, she said. Twice. The accounts, he saw St. Jr. find it. Find where those hours go after they land there. I started last night, she said. James. The routing number on that account doesn't go to a person. It goes to a business account. A business. A pause. The kind that meant the answer was going to change the shape of things. A limited liability company, she said. Registered in Delaware 14 months ago. Name of the company is Efficient Operations LLC. James stared at the windshield. And the connection to Craig? He asked. Craig's gets a percentage, she said. Based on what I can see so far. But the majority of the funds go to the primary account holder for the LLC. Who? The pause was shorter this time, but heavier. The registered agent for Efficient Operations LLC, Nadine said slowly, is Garrett Pruitt. James sat in a rental car in a parking lot in Detroit at 5:53 a.m, and for a long moment he didn't say anything. Garrett Pruitt, VP of Regional Operations, promoted 4 months ago. A man who had given a toast about integrity at the company's 20th anniversary, who had read aloud at a memorial service and made everyone in the room feel better for it, who had been building a shell company 4 months before James handed him a promotion with regional access to 7 stores, who had been building it for 10 months before that. How many stores? James asked. 7 that I can confirm, Nadine said. There may be more. James looked at the building across the parking lot. Store 44. His store. Don't contact legal yet, he said. Don't contact anyone at the regional level. I need 2 more days. James, her voice dropped. The note. On your car, someone inside wants me to keep going, he said. I'm going to keep going. A breath on the line. 2 days, she said. 2 days, he said. And then we take it apart. He hung up. Sat there another moment. The parking lot was beginning to lighten. The first shift employees would arrive in 2 hours. He thought about the column of hours. About Rose's name disappearing from the cells. About a woman in her early 40s who had counted 36 months, because counting was the only control she had over any of it. He thought about Camila, 8 years old, an elephant named Gerald who needed remedial math. He thought about what 2 more days was going to cost. Then he went back to the hotel to sleep for 3 hours and come back. James had 3 hours of sleep and a legal pad full of notes. He sat at the small desk in room 214 with the curtains open and the Detroit morning coming in gray and flat through the glass. Coffee from the lobby machine. The kind that was technically coffee in the same way that particle board was technically wood. He drank it anyway. The legal pad had 4 columns. Dates, names, actions, amounts. 3 pages in, the amounts column had stopped being numbers he could look at calmly. The total was climbing past what most people in that building made in a year. And that was from one store. From 8 months of documentation, from a system that had been running across 7 locations for over a year before James had looked up from his quarterly reports long enough to notice that something was wrong with the silence. His attorney had called it 6 on the dot. Federal wage theft prosecution, the man explained, kicked in when the amount exceeded $1,000, or when the theft was part of a pattern. What James had documented cleared both thresholds by a significant margin. Add wire fraud, the transfer of stolen funds across state lines through electronic means, and the shell company structure, and they were looking at federal felony exposure for everyone in the chain. Everyone in the chain, which now included Garrett Pruitt. James wrote the name at the top of a clean page and sat looking at it. He had known Garrett for 9 years, had promoted him twice, had trusted the reports that came up through Garrett's region, because there was a way of presenting information that felt thorough, felt transparent, felt like someone who understood that good data was the foundation of good decisions. Now, James understood something else. Garrett had understood that good data was the foundation of good decisions. He'd just been curating the data, presenting the numbers that made Craig look like an efficiency genius, routing the cost savings upward to a company that existed on paper in Delaware, and making sure that every approval form that might have raised questions carried a signature that would redirect any investigation away from him. A forged signature, James's signature. He picked up the burner phone, texted Nadine, the approval forms. I need to know exactly how the signatures were replicated. Digital forgery or physical scan. Her reply came in 6 minutes, digital. Someone with system-level access copied your signature from a legitimate form you signed in March of last year, applied it as an embedded image to every approval document submitted from Store 44 for the past 8 months. The metadata shows the forgeries were created on a device not registered to any corporate account. He read it twice. System-level access meant regional management and above. Craig was a store manager. Craig didn't have system-level access. Garrett did. James put the phone down, picked up the coffee, drank it without tasting it. The private router in Craig's office, the one not connected to the store's network. That was how Craig submitted the altered payroll records and benefits changes without them passing through corporate monitoring. And Garrett, from the regional level, had the access to approve those submissions and route the funds before anyone with oversight responsibility saw them. It was, James acknowledged reluctantly, an elegant construction. Oh men, 2 levels, a fake signature, a shell company in a state that asked no questions, and at the bottom of all of it, 14 employees whose hours disappeared from one column and reappeared in another. He needed 2 more days. He needed Craig to stay comfortable. He needed Garrett to stay unaware. And he needed one more piece that he didn't have yet. Something that put Garrett's own voice on the record. Not just financial documents, not just metadata. Something that made it impossible for a defense attorney to argue that Garrett had been deceived by Craig and was himself a victim of a subordinate's misconduct. He needed Garrett to speak. James changed into the worn jeans and work boots, put on the second-hand jacket, checked the burner phone, checked the notepad, put the cash Craig had promised him. The $300 he'd taken from the envelope in the parking lot, in a separate pocket. He was going to donate every dollar of it to a labor rights organization before the week was out. Then he went back to Store 44. The afternoon shift was different from the morning. More customers, fuller registers, the particular energy of a retail store in the middle of a weekday, which was steady and unremarkable, and underneath that unremarkability, quietly stressful for everyone who worked in it. James spent the afternoon in the aisles, not shopping, watching. He had become very good at watching without appearing to watch. It was a skill he'd developed early, in places where watching openly was considered a provocation. You learn to look at the middle distance, to use your peripheral vision, to absorb information through the parts of your awareness that didn't announce themselves. Brianna Kowalski was at Register 3, 7 months pregnant, moving with the careful deliberateness of a body that was managing more than it had signed up for. Between transactions, her left hand rested on the counter edge. Not dramatically, just resting. The unconscious gesture of someone redistributing weight they couldn't put down. James watched a supervisor walk past her 3 times without stopping, without asking, without acknowledging in any way that the woman at Register 3 was 7 months pregnant and had been on her feet for 4 hours. The supervisor's name tag said Kevin. Kevin had the specific eyes of someone who had learned that paying attention to certain things was a liability. James found Marcus Webb in electronics. I had read Marcus's file. 31 years old, 3 years at the store. Consistent performance reviews, which in this context meant Craig had found no grounds to manufacture a complaint. Electronic sales numbers were the highest in the store. Had applied for a shift supervisor position 14 months ago. Application never processed. Marcus was explaining something to his customer. The difference between television models, by the look of it. With the patience of someone who genuinely liked understanding things and liked helping other people understand them. The customer left looking satisfied. Marcus turned back to his section and his face went to neutral, the expression that went back on when the interaction ended. The face you wore when you were at work, and work was not a place where you were allowed to look like yourself. James crossed to the electronics section and started looking at a display of portable speakers he had no interest in. Marcus appeared at his shoulder within 30 seconds. Customer service reflexes. Can I help you find something? Just looking, James said. Then after a beat, you've been here a while, Marcus's eyes moved, quick, to the floor camera position, to the manager's office window, to James. Few years, he said carefully. Place to work? The specific silence that followed that question had a texture, the texture of a man deciding how much truth was safe. It's a job, Marcus said, which was the most precise non-answer James had heard all week. He didn't push. I bought the portable speaker, the cheaper one, because Joe Williams would buy the cheaper one, and walked away, but had seen what he needed to see. Marcus Webb was watching, carefully, precisely, the way people watch when they've decided that watching is the only thing they can do. At 3:43, Craig appeared. James checked his watch. Because he had been checking his watch every time Craig appeared, mapping the intervals, building the pattern. Craig walked the floor with his clipboard. Found nothing wrong with electronics. Moved through cosmetics. Stopped near housewares where Rosa was reorganizing a display. The display didn't need reorganizing. She was doing it the way you do something when your hands need an occupation while you wait for a shift to pass. Craig stopped. Looked at the display, looked at Rosa, said nothing, just looked. Rosa's hands kept moving, precise, controlled. The discipline of someone who had learned not to flinch. Craig moved on. James had timed the interaction, 40 seconds. Craig had contributed nothing. He had stood there for 40 seconds and used his presence as a reminder of something. A reminder that he was there, that he was watching, that her continued employment existed at his discretion, and she should not forget it. That was not management. That was a specific kind of pressure applied to a specific kind of person. James wrote the time in his notepad. Craig disappeared into his office at 3:51. The private router was visible from the doorway, its small indicator light blinking steady green. At 4:03, Craig came out with a stack of papers and a different energy, purposeful, slightly elevated. The energy of someone who was expecting company. He made 3 calls from his mobile phone, walking the back corridor where the PA system couldn't pick up his voice. James was restocking display shelves 20 feet away and couldn't hear the words, but he could hear the tone differential. Careful. The voice of someone reporting to someone else. He texted Nadine, is Garrett Pruitt traveling today? Her reply came while he was still watching Craig's back. Flight from Cincinnati to Detroit. Arriving DTW at 6:14 p.m. James pocketed the phone. Garrett was coming here tomorrow, maybe, or the day after. The timing of Craig's calls, the elevated energy, the careful tone, that was preparation. He needed to be ready. Rosa arrived for the night shift at 9:45. She was moving differently than the day before. The careful walk had gotten more careful, favoring the left leg more noticeably. Her face was composed in the way faces get when something physical hurts, and you've made a decision not to tell anyone about it. because telling someone requires trusting them. And trust was not something Store 44 had given her reason to extend. "You okay?" James asked. She looked at him with the expression she'd worn when he first saw her. The quick, precise assessment. "Fine," she said, which he was beginning to understand was her default setting and meant approximately nothing. They started the east wing. Same route as the night before. A physical rhythm of it coming slightly easier to James's body on the second night. Not comfortable, but less unfamiliar. At 10:30, he saw the supply closet situation in full. Azza was trying to dilute the remaining floor cleaner to make it stretch across the east wing. She did it precisely, the way someone does something they've done many times and have calibrated through trial and error. 1 part cleaner, 3 parts water. Any more water and the solution stopped being effective. Any less cleaner and there wasn't enough to finish. "How long has it been like this?" James asked. 3 months, she said. He cut the supply budget, said we were using too much. She held up the bottle. "This has to last the entire store through Friday." James knew the corporate supply allocation. He had approved it himself at a budget meeting 2 years ago. After a facilities management study showed that adequate cleaning supplies reduced slip and fall incidents by 31% and extended floor material lifespan by an average of 4 years. What he was looking at was 1/10 of what should have been there. "What happens when it runs out before Friday?" he asked. She looked at him. "Water," she said, simply. James said nothing. His hands were on the supply cart. He kept them there. Rosa returned to work. At 11:45, Craig arrived for his second round. He walked the east wing slowly, found Rosa mopping near the household goods section, and stood watching for 2 minutes. "You're behind again," he said. "I'm on schedule," Rosa said. "My schedule says you're behind." He opened his clipboard, made a notation, 15 minutes docked. Rosa's jaw moved once. She absorbed it. Craig looked at James Williams. He said the name like he was testing it. "How's it going?" "Good," James said. "Keeping your eyes open?" "Always," James said. Craig gave a small satisfied nod, walked away. James watched Rosa dip the mop back into the bucket. Her knuckles were white on the handle for a moment. Then they relaxed. Then she kept working. He thought about the 15 minutes, $3 and change at her rate. Taken in front of a witness on a night when she was doing nothing wrong, in a store where her hours were already 36 hours short of what full-time classification required. He added it to the notepad. At 12:41, Craig completed his round and went into his office. James confirmed the door position, almost closed, the 2-inch gap, light falling through. He had the camera ready. He moved the cart into position. Through the gap, he could see Craig's monitor. Tonight there were 2 windows open side by side. The payroll spreadsheet on the left, he recognized it from the night before, and on the right, a different system. The company's health insurance enrollment portal. Employee benefits management. Craig was in Rosa's file. James could see her name at the top of the screen, Rosa Mendez. Employment classification, benefits eligibility. Craig clicked through the drop-down menu. The classification field read, full-time permanent, eligible. Craig changed it to part-time temporary, ineligible. Then he moved to the benefits enrollment tab. Rosa's health insurance showed active. Craig opened a notes field, typed something James couldn't read from this angle. Clicked submit. The status changed, active. A suspended pending reclassification review. It took 40 seconds. The kind of thing that takes 40 seconds and changes a family's life. James was recording all of it. He held the phone steady, kept his breathing even. The file was uploading to Nadine's encrypted server in real time. Then Craig picked up his phone, dialed. James couldn't hear the voice on the other end. Too much distance, too much door between them. But he could hear Craig, and Craig was not using his floor voice. Not the clipped clipboard voice he used with employees. Not the practiced authority of a man managing a retail store. This was different, careful, slightly tight. The voice of someone who reported to someone and knew it. "I updated the Mendez file," Craig said. "And the new one, Kowalski, she's 7 months along, so she'll be out soon anyway. Put her on inventory rotation starting Thursday. She'll quit before the month's out." A pause, listening. "Hours are 14% from last quarter. That's what you asked for." Another pause. Shorter. "I know you said 15. I'm getting there." James held the phone steady. "The new guy is fine. He's useful. I've got him watching Mendez and Webb." A pause. "Yeah, I checked him out. He's clean, just desperate." A low sound that might have been a laugh. "Best kind." James thought I have been underestimated my entire career by exactly this kind of man. Mendez's situation is handled, Craig continued. She's not going to file anything. She's got the kid with the heart thing. She knows if she loses this job, she loses everything. A pause longer. Garrett, that's what I'm telling you. She's contained. Garrett. Not a subordinate checking in with a peer. A subordinate checking in with his architect. I'll have the numbers to you by Friday, Craig said. 7 stores, same projection. You'll have what you need for the board presentation. A pause. Thursday works. See you then. The call ended. James moved the cart. Down the corridor, around the corner, into the supply area. He stopped recording, uploaded the file, sent Nadine a text, audio attached. Garrett Pruitt directing operations. He's coming to the store Thursday. I need FBI field office contact by morning. Do not move on anything yet. He put the phone in his pocket. Stood in the supply closet surrounded by insufficient resources and for light and the particular weight of knowing exactly what you're dealing with. Garrett Pruitt, who had given a toast about integrity, who had sat in budget meetings and talked about taking care of people, who was coming to the store on Thursday to review the numbers that Craig had built on stolen hours and suspended insurance, and the calculated exploitations of people who couldn't afford to fight back. Thursday was 2 days away. James looked at the nearly empty cleaning supply shelf. Then he went back to work. Wednesday was the night things got physical, not with Craig. Not in the way James had been bracing for. Rosa fell in the stockroom at 11:47. It wasn't dramatic. That was the thing about workplace injuries that happened to people who were used to managing pain quietly. They tended not to be dramatic. A wet spot on the concrete near the back pallet section. Ho warning cone. No anti-slip mat, because the anti-slip mats had been removed from the stockroom budget 5 months ago, along with the adequate cleaning supplies and the function lights in the electronics corridor. Rosa caught herself on the shelving unit, but she caught herself hard, left wrist taking the impact. James was there in 20 seconds. She was on the floor, not badly down, but down. Don't move, he said. Take a second. I'm fine, Rosa. His voice came out differently than he intended. Quieter, more direct, not Joe Williams's voice. Take a second. She stopped, sat on the concrete and breathed. Her left wrist was at an angle that made him think she'd caught herself with real force. Can you move it? He asked. She tried, kept her face still. But the stillness itself was information. We're filing a report, he said. She looked at him sharply. Joe, tonight, before the shift ends. Whatever Craig does with it, the documentation exists. That matters. If I file a report, he'll use it. She said it without heat, just fact. He'll add it to the performance file. Unreliable. Prone to accidents, it becomes a reason. I know what he does with reports, James said. She went still, looked at it. The 2-inch gap between what he'd said and what Joe Williams should have been able to know opened in the air between them. You know what he does, she said slowly. James held her gaze. Yes, he said. A pause, the longest one since they'd met. Rosa looked at him the way people look at someone when they're recalculating a conversation they thought they understood. Joe, she said quietly, who are you? He wanted to answer. Right here, on this stockroom floor, with its absent mats and its single overhead bulb, at 11:47 on a Wednesday night. He didn't. Someone who's been watching, he said. And someone who needs one more day. Can you trust me for one more day? She studied his face. I've been trusting the wrong people for 3 years, she said. I know, he said. I'm going to try to be a different kind. Another long pause. One more day, she said. He helped her up. She wrapped the wrist herself with a bandage she found in the first aid kit. Not the proper kind, the improvised kind, and went back to work. Stopping was not something she had decided to let herself do. At 4 a.m, Marcus Webb found James in the parking lot. James had stepped out to send files to Nadine. The loading dock was quiet. The night had gotten colder, the Michigan January asserting itself after a mild evening. Marcus appeared from the employee entrance, looked both ways across the lot, walked to where James was standing. He was holding an envelope, not cash, folded papers, pulled from the inner pocket of his jacket. I don't know who you are, Marcus said, and I'm not asking, but you look at Craig the way someone looks at a thing they already understand. He held out the envelope. I've been keeping these. James took it. 14 months, Marcus said. Payroll printouts before he edits them. I screenshot the scheduling board before his changes and after. I've got them dated. I annotated what I could see was different. He paused. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. I just knew it was wrong, and I thought maybe if I had it written down, if someone ever showed me to do something. He stopped. James opened the envelope, scanned the top sheet, payroll register. Before column and after column, Keg's is visible in the margins in Marcus's careful blue pen annotations. 14 months of careful Marcus, James said. I need you to trust me for one more day. Marcus looked at him steadily. The same steady look he'd worn in electronics when James asked if it was a good place to work. I've been trusting the wrong people for 14 months, he said. One more wrong one isn't going to make it worse. He walked back inside. James stood in the parking lot alone, holding an envelope that contained, along with everything else he had accumulated, enough to make a federal case that no defense team on Earth could dismantle. He put it in his jacket pocket, next to Craig's $300, hucks to the notepad, 4 pages full now, next to the burner phone, with its recordings and its encrypted uploads, and its thread of text to Nadine that had been building toward this moment since Monday morning. He texted her. Ready to move Thursday afternoon. Store meeting at 3 p.m. FBI needs to be positioned outside by 2:30. Garrett will be in the building. I want him in the building when it happens. Her reply came immediately. Already coordinated. Field agent confirmed. They'll stay outside until your signal. Garrett's car rental shows he picked up a vehicle at DTD at 6:42 p.m. Wednesday. He's in Detroit. James looked at the store entrance. Thursday, less than 12 hours. He went back inside and finished the shift. Thursday started with the black SUV. James saw it from the parking lot at 9:22. He was returning a cart to the storage unit, had his back to the lot, and heard the specific sound of a vehicle that cost more than it needed to. He did not turn around. He heard the door open, heard footsteps on pavement. The particular cadence of someone who walked like their time was worth tracking. On Craig's voice from the employee entrance. Warmer than James had ever heard it. The full register shift of a man greeting someone whose opinion of him determined his income. Garrett, good to see you. And Garrett's voice, familiar, relaxed, a voice James had heard in conference rooms and at dinners, and at the anniversary event where Garrett had stood up and talked about what it meant to build something that lasted. How are things here? Clean, Craig said. Real clean. Their footsteps moved inside. The door closed. James stood with his hands on the cart, breathed. He thought about Efficient Operations LLC, registered in Delaware 14 months ago. About 7 stores and the amounts in the amounts column of his legal pad. About a forged signature applied to 8 months of approval forms. About a woman whose insurance had been suspended with 40 mouse clicks, while James stood in a corridor 10 feet away. He thought about Thursday. He went inside. He spent the morning doing something he had not done in years, walking the store, not the edges floor, the aisle by all aisle. The way a customer moves, slow, stopping, looking. He watched his employees. The cashier near the entrance, late 20s, efficient. The smile of someone good at her job, who knew that being good at it didn't protect her from anything. The stock clerk in dry goods, with the methodical pace of someone who had found a rhythm and was staying in it, because rhythm was the only way to make a shift feel manageable. Diana at Register 3, the hand on the counter edge between transactions, 7 months. Still here, still showing up. And Rosa, in the back through the stockroom door, working one-handed, the bandaged wrist held slightly away from her body, moving slowly but moving, because Rosa Mendez had not decided to stop. James stood in the housewares aisle for a long time. He thought about the handbook, the one Rosa had told him she'd kept, the one she'd read. He had written that handbook, personally. 12 years ago, at the kitchen table of the house he'd bought when the company had its first profitable quarter, starting at midnight, finishing near 4 in the morning, thinking, these are the rules, these are the things that make us different. He had written it, and then he had gotten busy, and then other people had implemented it, and then other people had overseen those people, and then it had become paper, policy on paper, living in handbooks given to new employees and filed in drawers. And in the distance between the midnight kitchen table and store 44, something had been consumed whole. At 2:15, Garrett appeared on the floor. He walked with Craig with his clipboard, Garrett with his hands in his pockets, the ease of someone doing a comfortable review. They moved through electronics, through housewares, past the register lanes. Garrett asked questions James couldn't hear. Craig answered them with the posture of a student who had prepared. James was in hardware, reading the back of a package of picture hooks. watching through 3 sets of displays and 1 open sightline. At 2:31, Nadine texted him, in position outside. Patricia is with me. FBI unit tour confirmed 2:45. You're clear when ready. He put the phone away, looked at the clock above customer service, 47 minutes. He went to find Rosa. She was in the break room, eating half a sandwich at one of the folding tables. The cracked screen phone face down beside her, the bandaged wrist resting in her lap. He sat across from her. She looked at him. Tomorrow, he said. Camilla's insurance review. They said 30 days, she said. It won't take 30 days, he said. She studied him. The same look from the stock room, the recalculation. You keep saying things like that, she said. Like you know. I do know, he said. How? He held her gaze. Because I'm going to make sure, he said. That's the only way I can say it right now. But I need you at the 3 o'clock meeting. Whatever Craig has planned, be there. Rosa looked at her and then at him. Is something going to happen? Yes. Yes, he said. She was quiet. Something good or something bad, she asked. James thought about the recordings, about the evidence on Nadine's servers, about the FBI unit positioned in the parking lot, about Garrett Pruitt, currently walking his own crime scene with his hands in his pockets. Something necessary, he said. Rosa looked at him for a long moment. Her face did the thing it had been doing all week, the door opening slightly, the careful extension of something she'd been holding back. Okay, she said. One word. Small. Waited. She picked up the other half of the sandwich and finished it. And James sat across from her in that break room, in that inadequate chair, under those fluorescent lights, and thought about what it cost a person to keep saying okay in a place that had given her no reason to. 3 o'clock was 18 minutes away. He was ready. James changed in the employee restroom at 2:58. Not his clothes. He didn't have different clothes. What he changed was the way he carried himself. The posture of Joe Williams, shoulders slightly forward, eyes slightly down, the physical grammar of a man who needed something. He let that go. Set it down deliberately. The way you set down a weight you've been carrying long enough that you've stopped noticing it. He stood at the sink and ran cold water over his hands. 4 days. His palms still had the beginning of calluses forming where the mop handle had pressed. His lower back was doing something he'd need to address when this was over. His hands looked like hands that had worked, which they hadn't looked like in a long time. He dried them, reached into his jacket pocket and found the items in sequence. The notepad 4 pages full, the burner phone with its recordings, the folded papers from Marcus's envelope, Craig's $300 which he was going to donate before the week ended, and last. In the breast pocket where he'd kept it since Monday morning, the CEO badge. He looked at it. Thompson Retail. James Whitfield. Chief Executive Officer. He had carried this in his pocket for 4 days, while mopping floors and moving pallets, and listening to a woman describe diluting cleaning solution with water, because there wasn't enough budget for the real thing. He had carried it while Craig Dawson stole hours from people who couldn't afford to lose them, while a shell company in Delaware collected the difference. While a man James had promoted shook his hand at dinners and used the word integrity. He pinned the badge on, looked in the mirror. Not Joe Williams. Not a cover story. Just himself. 55 years old. Gray at the temples. The son of a woman named Dorothea who had worked overnight custodial shifts for 22 years and smelled like effort when she came home. He walked out of the restroom and toward the main floor. Nadine's text came at 2:59. FBI unit in position. 2 agents at each entrance. Patricia is ready with the HR team, give the word. He typed back 1 character, a period, which she would understand as, wait for me. He rounded the corner into the main floor. The meeting was already assembling. Craig had arranged it the way he arranged everything, deliberately. With attention to the geometry of power, 15 employees in a semicircle near customer service. Craig at the center with his clipboard. The open space around him that he always manufactured, the invisible perimeter that said, this is my territory and you are in it. James count the faces. Rose at the back of the group, bandaged wrist at her side. Marcus on the right, arms crossed, expression neutral in the way that wasn't actually neutral. Brianna near the register counter, standing because there were no chairs, one hand resting on the counter edge. 12 others James had watched over 4 days. Cashiers, stock clerks, a woman from cosmetics who moved like someone who had learned to be invisible. Garrett Pruitt was not in the semicircle. James scanned. Not on the floor, not visible through the office windows. He texted Nadine quickly. Where is Garrett? Her reply. Break room, far end. I can see him through the window. Good. Inside the building. That was what mattered. Craig was already talking. Inventory accountability, he said. The clipboard out. The notations ready. Starting next week, any discrepancy in your assigned section comes out of your pay. Miscounts, missing merchandise, damaged goods, it gets logged and deducted. He held up a stack of forms. You're each going to sign one of these today acknowledging the new policy. James watched the faces. The particular expression of people receiving information they know is wrong but have no language for in this context. The resignation that wears the mask of compliance, because a compliance is the only option that doesn't cost something immediately. Brianna's hand tightening on the counter edge. Marcus looking at a fixed point above Craig's head. Rosa very still. The stillness of someone who had absorbed so many things and was absorbing another one. Craig was still talking. I know some of you may have questions. The answer is that this is a company directive and it's non-negotiable, effective. That's not a company directive, James said. From the back of the semicircle. Not loud. Clear. Every head turned. James walked through the group. People stepped aside without quite knowing why. Something in the quality of his movement. The way he was no longer moving like a man who needed something from this building. He stopped in the center of the space, across from Craig. Craig's expression ran through several states in quick succession. Confusion. Recognition that something had shifted. The beginning of something that wasn't quite fear, but was adjacent to it. Deducting inventory discrepancies from employee wages, James said, is a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. It's been federal law since 1938. It's not a gray area. It's not a policy question. It's a crime. Buck's jaw worked. Not know what you think. James reached into his jacket. Not the badge, not yet. The phone, he placed it on the customer service counter. Press play. Craig's own voice came out of the speaker. Clear, unhurried. The voice of a man confident that no one was listening. Yeah, I updated the Mendez file. And the new one, Kowalski. She's 7 months as long, so she'll be out soon anyway. I put her on inventory rotation starting Thursday. She'll quit before the month's out. Nobody moved. The recording kept going. Hours are down 14% from last quarter. Garrett, that's what you asked for. The name hit the room differently than everything else had. James felt it. The shift in the air when Garrett Pruitt's name came out of Craig Dawson's mouth in Craig Dawson's own voice. The Mendez situation is handled. She's not going to file anything. She's got the kid with the heart thing. She knows if she loses this job, she loses everything. She's contained. James reached over and stopped the recording. The word sat in the room. Contained. He looked at Craig. Craig had gone the color of old concrete. His clipboard was still in his hand. Held now not like a weapon, but like something to hold on to. That recording is, he started. Michigan, James said. One-party consent state. I was a participant in the conversation. You can't, this is. Craig's voice was losing its shape. You don't know who you're dealing with. Garrett Pruitt is. James reached into his breast pocket, took out the badge, put it on, and for the first time in 4 days, he stood in this building as himself. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. My name is James Whitfield. He said, I am the founder and CEO of Thompson Retail. I have been working in this store since Monday morning, and I have spent 4 days documenting what has been happening here. He let that land. 15 people, 14 employees, and one man who was not an employee anymore. Craig Dawson, James said. You are terminated, effective immediately. Craig moved, not toward James, toward the registers. The instinct of a man who needed to get to something. His phone, his office, the private router, and whatever documentation he thought he had that might still protect him. James said, don't. One word. Craig stopped. Because the front doors opened at that moment, and Nadine walked in with Patricia Moore and 2 other people whose bearing made their purpose clear, even without the credentials they were prepared to show. Craig looked at them, looked at James, looked at the phone on the counter, and the last calculation Craig Dawson ever ran in that building came up with nothing. But he had one card left. He played it. I think this is just me. His voice was rising, uneven. The sound of a man who had built his security on other people's, discovering that the fear had transferred. I think Garrett set this up alone. You want to see the approval forms? You want to talk about whose signature is on everything? He pointed, shaking. Your name is on 8 months of approvals. Every form, every quarter. You want to take me down, you're going to take yourself down with me. Nobody is going to believe a word against a VP when the CEO's own signature. The signatures were forged, James said. Quiet, exact. The pointing hand dropped. Digital document forensics confirmed it 3 days ago, James said. The FBI has the full forensic report. Our private router provided the connection Garrett used to generate and transmit the forged documents. The metadata traces back to a device registered to Efficient Operations LLC. He paused. Which is Garrett Pruitt's shell company, which has been receiving wage theft proceeds from 7 stores for 14 months. Craig's mouth was open. Nothing came out. Every hour you stole, James said. Every insurance enrollment you suspended. Every scheduling change designed to keep someone just under the threshold that would give them protection. It is documented. In federal hands. And it has been since Tuesday night. He looked at Craig for one more moment. Then he looked at the 2 agents near the door. They walked forward. One of them said Craig's name, then his rights, in the flat procedural voice of someone who had done this before and would do it again. Craig walked out, past the registers, past the customer service desk where he had orchestrated 100 small degradations, past the break room where employees had eaten 12-minute lunches and called them 15, past the bulletin board where the schedule had been a weapon. The front doors closed behind him. James stood in the center of the customer service area and let the silence happen, 'cause it needed to. 15 people, 14 now, standing in a semicircle. The aftermath of something, the specific stillness that follows when a pressure that has been constant. Stop. Brianna made a sound, small, involuntary. Both hands on the counter, now, not crying. Something past crying, something that didn't have a clean category. Marcus exhaled. The exhalation of a man releasing something that had been stored in his chest for 14 months. Rosa stood at the back of the group. She hadn't moved since the recording played. Same position, same stillness, but different now. The stillness of someone who had heard her own name come out of a speaker in her manager's voice and learned, in a public room full of her coworkers, exactly how she had been spoken about when she wasn't there. She was contained. She had been contained. James looked at her. She looked back at him. He nodded. Once. And she nodded back. Once, which was the whole conversation for now. Ideen pulled James aside at 3:22. Garrett is still in the break room, she said quietly. He heard the recording. The agents have been watching him through the window. He hasn't moved. Does he know the agents are here? He knows something is wrong. He hasn't made any calls. His phone is on the table in front of him, and he hasn't touched it. Which told James something. A man who didn't know he was caught would be calling his attorney by now. A man who understood what was happening would be doing the math on what calling anyone might cost him. I'll talk to him, James said. Nadine started to say something. I'll talk to him, James said again. Not dismissively, just certain. She stepped back. James walked to the break room. Garrett Pruitt was sitting at the far table, jacket still on. Hands folded on the table surface in the deliberate way of a man imposing order on himself. His face, when James came through the door, ran through 3 expressions in the space of a second. Recognition, calculation, and underneath both of those, the specific thing that no amount of composure could entirely suppress. He knew. James sat across from him, the same table where Rosa ate half a sandwich, the same plastic chairs, the same terrible light. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Garrett said, How long? I've been here since Monday, James said. No. Garrett's voice was controlled. How long have we known? Tuesday night, James said. When I heard your name on Craig's phone. Garrett looked at the table. A muscle moved in his jaw. I want you to understand something, James said. Not for your benefit, for mine. I need to ask you directly. He leaned forward slightly. You sat in my boardroom for 9 years. You told me what was working and what wasn't. I had every opportunity to tell me that the pressure you were putting on regional managers to cut labor costs was producing this. He paused. Why didn't you? Garrett looked up. Because you wanted the numbers, he said. That's what you wanted. Every quarter, better numbers. And I gave them to you. I wanted honest numbers. You wanted better ones, Garrett said again, not defensively, flatly. I know the difference. I've sat in enough of those meetings. When the numbers are honest and they're not better, the conversation that follows is very specific. I've been in that conversation. He paused. I found a way to make the numbers better. You didn't ask how. James was quiet. Not because Garrett's right, because Garrett was partly right. And partly right was a more difficult thing to sit with than entirely wrong. That is not an explanation, James said. It is not a justification, and it does not come close to accounting for what you built. No, Garrett said. It doesn't. You used people's desperation as a budget line, James said. You found managers willing to systematically abuse vulnerable employees, and you built a financial structure to profit from it. And you did it for 14 months. He held Garrett's eyes. You are going to face federal prosecution for wire fraud, conspiracy, and wage theft. That is happening. There is nothing in this room that changes that. Garrett looked at the table again. I know, he said. What I want, James said, is for you to tell me the full scope, every store, every manager involved. Every account, not to the FBI first, to me first, because the people who worked in those stores deserve to know what was taken from them. A long pause. Then Garrett reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, placed it on the table, and slid it across to James. The app called Budget Manager, he said. It's actually an accounting ledger. Password is the date of the Delaware registration. He paused. All 7 stores, all the amounts, the names of the managers who participated, and the ones who didn't know the full timeline. James looked at the phone. Then he picked it up. I stood. Your attorney, They call them now, not in 10 minutes. Now walk to the break room door, James. Garrett's voice behind him, quiet without the calculation. James stopped, didn't turn. I'm sorry, Garrett said. James stood in the doorway for a moment. I know you are, he said. That's not the same as it being okay. He walked out. Patricia Moore set up in the break room at 3:45, 3 laptops, a portable printer, 2 HR specialists who had driven from corporate that morning and had been waiting in a coffee shop 2 blocks away since noon. The particular focused energy of people who understood that the bureaucratic work they were about to do had real consequences for real people, and were taking that seriously. James stood in the break room doorway and looked at his employees. 14 people. Some still in the customer service area, some drifting toward the break room, all of them in the specific state of people who had witnessed something significant and were not yet sure what it meant for them personally. Relief and uncertainty are not mutually exclusive. They coexist often in the hours after something long wrong finally stops. He addressed them directly. I want to explain what happens now, he said, because you deserve to know and not to have to wait for it. The room settled. Every personnel file that Craig Dawson touched is being audited today. Scheduling records, payroll, benefits enrollment. If hours were stolen from you, you will receive calculated wages. If benefits were denied to which you were entitled, those benefits are being reinstated. If your classification was changed to deprive you of coverage, your correct classification is being stored. He paused. Patricia and her team are here to do that work right now. Today, not next week. Today. Brianna raised her hand. Like a student in a classroom who wasn't sure she was allowed to. My insurance, she said. I'm 7 months. If my coverage lapses, it hasn't lapsed, James said. It was never supposed to change. Patricia, Brianna Kowalski is first. Patricia nodded, opened her laptop, said Brianna's name, and gestured to the chair across from her. Brianna walked across the room. At the door she stopped, turned. Thank you, she said, to the room as much as to James. The word seemed to cost her something to say and also to relieve something in the saying of it. She sat down. Patricia's fingers were already moving. Marcus was next. He sat across from James at the end of the table, the envelope of photographs between them. 14 months, James said. You carried that alone. I didn't know what else to do, Marcus said. Filing a complaint through Craig was pointless, and I didn't know. He stopped. I didn't know the number. The real number, the one that actually gets to someone who can do something. James made a note of that, in his head. Not the notepad this time. The kind of note that becomes a policy change. The assistant manager position, James said. Dean tells me it's been open for a while. It was open when you applied 14 months ago. Application was never processed, Marcus said. I know. James looked at him. I want you to consider it. Marcus was quiet for a moment then. I'm good at electronics. I know that section the way I know my own apartment. I know what customers need before they say it. I know the inventory without looking. He paused. I don't know if leaving that to manage people is the right move for me. James nodded. No hesitation. Then on, he said. Marcus blinked. What? Stay in electronics. We're restructuring the pay grades for specialist positions. Someone with your level of knowledge and tenure should be compensated as the specialist they are, not as a replaceable hourly. James paused. But if you change your mind about management, I want to hear it. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Okay, he said. slowly, weighing the word. And Marcus. James held his gaze. The note. A very specific stillness. On my car, James said. Tuesday morning. Marcus looked at the table, then back at James. Michigan is a big state, he said. Lots of people write notes. He stood, went back to his section. James sat at the table for a moment. Lots of people write notes. He thought about Monday morning, the parking lot, the loaded silences, the 14 months of photographs. A man who had decided that watching carefully and writing things down was the only tool available to him, until someone showed up who had a different set of tools. He put the envelope in his jacket pocket, next to the notepad, next to the burner phone. Then he went to find Rosa. She was in the office, not Craig's office anymore. That territory had dissolved the moment Craig walked out past the registers. What remained was just a room. 4 walls, a desk, a window onto the sales floor. Rosa was sitting in the chair across from the desk, the same chair she'd been directed to every time Craig called her in. Old position, new context entirely. James sat across from her, pulled the manager's chair slightly to the side so they were angled toward each other rather than separated by the desk's full width. Nadine appeared in the doorway, set a folder on the desk, left without a word. I want to go through this with you, James said. Not at you, with you. Rosa looked at the folder. Her expression was guarded still. Not for James, exactly. A structure built over 3 years that didn't dismantle in an afternoon just because the reason for it had been walked out the front door. James understood that. 36 months of employment, he said. Your correct classification is full-time permanent. It has been since month 4. Craig reclassified you in month 7 and adjusted the records retroactively. He paused. Patricia's team has corrected it. Your file now reflects your actual history. Rosa looked at her hands. Camila's insurance, she said. Full coverage, James said. Retroactive to your hire date. Pre-authorization for the surgery was submitted to the hospital 40 minutes ago. Patricia spoke to their billing office directly. It's confirmed. Rosa went very still. 4 seconds. Then she pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling briefly. Not crying. The controlled version of the thing that would have been crying if she'd permitted it. The surgery is Tuesday, she said. I know, he said. It'll be covered, she nodded, absorbed it with the discipline of someone who had learned that hope was a thing you received carefully. Back wages, James said. $14,847. Unpaid overtime. The rate difference over 36 months. And benefits contributions that should have been made on your behalf. He put the sheet in front of her. The check will be issued within 48 hours. Rosa looked at the number, didn't touch the paper. That's real, she said quietly. She looked up. What happens to this store? She asked. That depends partly on you, he said. She went all still, different kind of still. I want to offer you a management training program, James said. 6 months. Shift supervisor immediately, with training running alongside. Business fundamentals, operations, and personnel management. Company covers everything. Your current salary stays the same throughout. She was already shaking her head. Small. Automatic. I clean floors, she said. You managed a broken operation for 3 years, he said. With inadequate supplies, an illegal schedule, denied benefits, and a risk that needed attention you didn't report because you couldn't afford to. You managed. Every single shift. I don't have a degree, she said. You have something I can't teach in a classroom, he said. You know what it costs to work here. You know the difference between a policy on paper and a policy on the floor. I can teach you profit margins. I cannot teach you what you already know. She looked through the window at the sales floor, at her colleagues moving differently than they'd moved this morning. The nearly imperceptible shift between people being surveilled and people being trusted. What if I'm not good at it? She said. Something loosened in James's chest. The right question. Not performed humility. Genuine. Then you'll know something about yourself you didn't know before, he said. And I'll have been wrong about my read of people, which has happened, not often, but it has. The corner of her mouth moved, not a smile. They are okay, she said, not the okay of someone with no other option. The okay of someone who had decided. James stood. Camila, he said, when she's recovered, if she wants to visit. Rosa looked up. She's been asking about the store. She wants to see where I work. Bring her, he said. I'll show her around personally. Rosa stood, straightened her badge. Still said Rosa Mendez, custodial staff. The new one hadn't been printed yet, but she wore it differently. Good night, Mr. Whitfield, she said. Good night, Rosa, he said. She walked out through the sales floor and out the employee entrance into a Thursday evening that was, for the first time in a long time, not something she needed to brace herself against before walking into. James stood at the office window, watched his employees. Marcus in electronics closing his section with the precision of someone who had always known his own value and was now in a place that knew it too. Brianna near the entrance, coat on, the specific ease of a person handed back something that should never have been taken. He stayed until the last employee had gone, turned off the light in Craig Dawson's office, and left. 6 months later, January, Chicago, the National Retail Federation Annual Conference. 800 people. The kind of room James had been standing in various configurations for 30 years. He had been asked to speak about profitability metrics. He had proposed a different topic. The program read, "The floor he never forgot. What happens when leadership loses its distance?" "I mopped floors for 4 days," he said. "My own floors, in my own store. And I found out that the person I had placed in charge had been systematically stealing from the people who worked there for 8 months. With the knowledge and direction of an executive I had promoted, across 7 locations, for over a year." The room was quiet. "It happened because I stopped paying attention," he said. "Not because I was careless about the business. I was reading every quarterly report, tracking every metric. What I wasn't doing was standing close enough to the work to see what the metrics were built on." He clicked to the first slide. Rosa Mendez, in a blazer, name badge straight. The posture of someone who had walked into her own authority. "She worked custodial for 3 years, he said. Systematically denied benefits she'd earned. Hours manipulated to keep her just under the protection threshold. She never filed a formal complaint. Not because she had no grounds. Because she had a daughter who needed heart surgery and understood correctly that this building's complaint system would have taken her job before it took her complaint." He looked at the room. "She is now the store manager of that location. Employee satisfaction is 91%. Customer ratings up 30. Turnover down 64%. Revenue up 19%. He paused. "We didn't achieve those numbers by cutting costs. We achieved by stopping the theft of wages, of hours, of the basic premise that if you show up and do the work, you will be treated as though you matter." He clicked again. $2.3 million. 7 stores. Total recovered for affected employees. "Garrett Pruitt is facing federal charges," he said. "Craig Dawson is facing federal charges. 6 other managers across 7 locations terminated and under investigation." He paused. "Before anyone in this room calculates that against your labor costs and thinks it sounds manageable, those numbers represent people. Families. Medical procedures that almost didn't happen. Children who came close to going without things they needed because someone decided their desperation was a budget line." He stepped to the edge of the stage. "Somewhere in every organization in this room," he said, "there is a version of that truth waiting to be told. The people holding it have learned, correctly through experience, that leadership is not positioned to receive it, not because of bad intentions, because of distance." He looked at the front row. Rosa was there, in the blazer. Beside her, a chair occupied by someone very small, Camila, 8 years old, fully recovered. A name tag printed that morning, VIP guest. Gerald the elephant in her lap, also badged, the result of a sticky note and a pen. Camila waved at the stage. James almost lost the thread. He found it. "Go back to your companies," he said. "Find the floor, the actual floor, where the work happens before it becomes a number. Stand on it without your title visible, without an agenda, and wait long enough for someone to tell you the truth." He looked at the room one final time. "Dignity is not a benefit," he said. "It is not a line item in an engagement budget. It is the baseline agreement. You came here to do work, and we will not use your need for this job against you." He stepped back from the podium. The applause started in the front row. For the second time in 4 days, the first person to stand was Rosa Mendez. 800 people followed. Outside the hotel, January air, Chicago cold. James stood on the sidewalk and thought about Monday morning. The rental car, the parking lot, the first step through the front door of a store that didn't know he was coming. He thought about 4 days. The mop, the notepad, the specific education of a back that hurt and hands that remembered something they hadn't done in decades. He had built this company for his mother. He was going to run it for Camilla. He straightened his jacket, walked back inside. There was still work to do. there was always still work to do, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like exactly what it was supposed to feel like.